Queen Elizabeth II, the UK's longest-serving monarch, has died at Balmoral aged 96 after reigning for 70 years. Many of us will feel a deep sense of sadness that the Queen has passed away. No one can deny that she led an extraordinary life, thrust into a position of power where she had to dedicate her entire existence, every single moment of every day, to the service of her country and the Commonwealth. It was a role that she rose to immediately, and most would agree she did it with immense determination, grace and aplomb. The Queen came to the throne in 1952 and has witnessed incredible social change. 15 Prime Ministers came and went. The British and global affairs swirled around. She really provided a rock of stability and continuity for all of us. She was a dedicated monarch, but also an extremely devoted wife, mother and grandmother. She was intelligent, funny and cool under pressure, wonderful traits as the most famous person on the planet. Her son, now King Charles III, said the death of his beloved mother was a moment of great sadness for him, that her loss would be deeply felt around the world. Well, we've gathered some of our Rema Media presenters together to reflect on the life of a Queen, and Cathy and Peter Shaw from Star join us today. Well, it's a sad day, isn't it? And I know that both of you have felt this very acutely. I'm going to start with you, Cathy. What was your first response when you found that she had passed away?
I couldn't believe it. I knew her health was failing and she was frail. I mean, it was only just in this past week that she was welcoming the new British Prime Minister, and although she was frail and had a walking stick, and the Prime Minister had to come to the Queen. But I thought, when I heard the news, it's like, no, too soon. Not yet. I wasn't ready.
Yeah, I think Boris Johnson said something like that in his reaction to her passing. He said, I think all of us had almost a child sort of like response, that somehow we expected her to last forever, but it's not the case. Pete, what about you? How did you respond?
I'm still processing it, I think. You sort of go into broadcast mode, and we knew that we had to change our complete program to recognise that the Queen, had passed on. So for me, I'm still processing it. Yeah, it's sort of shock and disbelief, but also remembering what an amazing woman she was. I mean, she's just remarkable. All the pressure, I can't even begin to imagine the pressure that she must have been under as a, 21-year-old, or 15-year-old something, when she found out she was going to be Queen, and then a short preparation time. And everybody looking at her every move, every moment of the day. And I just think she was a remarkable lady.
7 decades of serving as the monarch. I mean, it's never happened before in history, and it probably won't happen ever again. The chances are not good, are they? Really. But you think about all the generations of people around the world who have been impacted by her life, and you can go all the way back to what was happening in the Second World War. She was Queen when Winston Churchill became Prime Minister for a second time. And as we just said in the introduction, 15 Prime Ministers since, right through to the latest one. I mean, it is just a remarkable reign that she's had. And I guess there's nobody, even if you're not a monarchist, who would have some sort of reaction to what has happened.
Yeah, I think Peter and I were chatting off air, and Peter, you were making the comment, there's the monarchy and then there's the Queen herself, just who she is as a person. And I think, just an incredible person. For me, her the dignity, her graciousness, it was no, nowadays with social media and everything and online, everything's sort of flashing lights. But for a huge part of her reign, it was just newspapers, or you might hear messages that, other ways. But just this thread right throughout of this, for me, this incredible quiet dignity and graciousness, and a woman of incredible deep faith, which I think came more and more to the fore as the years went by.
Something that was certainly evident in her life throughout the years, though, and she was part of people calling people to prayer as things would happen in the nation or in the Commonwealth. And certainly in her Christmas messages, her faith would come through, and she was overt about blessing the nation, talking about her own religious journey, going to church, and she's done that every single year of her reign. I mean, Pete, that's something that our audience will be thinking about right now.
Yeah, I think, and she, as she grew in more confidence, I guess, I think it was Prince Philip who encouraged her to talk more about her faith, especially in the Christmas messages. I think that's the other thing is they were such a strong team together, and their marriage, I'm sure it's had its ups and downs, but it was that strength, and she must have, drawn support from Prince Philip. I think his death last year obviously would have been a huge impact on her life. I mean, who did she have to share things with? I mean, she had to keep this public face so much of the time, and I think that must have been a huge impact on her life when Prince Philip. What did she say? He was the stalwart of her life. She was remarkable in that she could keep going. And 2 days ago, I mean, she was, bringing in the next Prime Minister. It was, I mean, she looked frail, but that was her duty, and that's what she did right to the end. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I found that so personally inspiring, her sense of commitment and duty. Just this, she didn't broadcast it, but she lived it and breathed it. And I think a tremendous inspiration, when you want to give up in your tough days, and you think of her and how she just persevered and quietly keeping on, and inspiring.
Interesting little fact, and we don't have to talk about it, but she lived so much of her life publicly. Apparently she sat for over 200 portrait painters in her reign. Isn't that incredible? So you think of the hours she just sat looking while somebody tried to paint her, a woman of incredible patience. For New Zealanders, and I have a memory of going to a parade where the Queen was going to be there, and being very excited about that as a younger child. Do you have any memories of Queen visits to New Zealand?
My memory is of 1963, the visit in 1963. I would have been, I think, about 8. And I can remember the excitement. We got the day off school. I mean, that was exciting for an 8-year-old anyway. And we had flags to wave. Now, I'm pretty sure it was a Union Jack flag in those days, because we were still very connected to Britain. And standing there waiting for this black car to drive past, and sort of seeing a vague figure in the car and shouting and waving the flag when she went past. That was my first memory.
Yeah.
I've got one some years on a later visit, and again, it was actually in Nelson and some sports grounds near the beach. And I don't know how old I was, but again, just the crowds that were there, and I didn't really understand who the Queen was, but she was very important, and everybody came out to see her, and we had the flags as well, and just remember seeing her and going, oh wow, and then went back to the playground playing. I've got another, well, it's a sort of a memory, but some years later, in my role with Rima Media, I was working in the newsroom. I cannot believe now that I turned this invite down. But in my role as a journalist, I was invited to meet the Queen on the Royal Yacht Britannia. But I was just about to give birth to my first child.
Cathy, I don't believe that you turned this down.
And I was exhausted, and I just couldn't cope with it, meeting the Queen and all the, the dignitary and all the stuff that goes with it. So one of my colleagues went instead, and now I look back, I think, oh, why did I turn that down?
It could have been an even more important story, because you might have given birth on the royal yacht.
On the royal yacht, they'll have royal children.
That's an incredible story. Going back to the Queen's, faith, and I think that it's a public figure. Obviously, we are very open about criticising people who are in the public square, and certainly the royal family hasn't been without its controversy. I always have felt like she managed all of the controversy with incredible grace and humility. Never once did I see her come out all guns blazing, accusing people of mispropriety or treating people badly. She seemed to understand innately what the role was and how to execute it in the right way.
Yeah. Actually, I've got, because I've got here a quote, and I need to read it because it's a little bit,
right.
but you were talking about the Christmas messages where a lot of her, that's when it came out in terms of her faith. And this was a Christmas message in 2012. I thought this was so beautiful. So there's a little bit before, and then she talks about, she's talked about the birth of Jesus and the Christmas carol. She says, the carol in the bleak midwinter ends by asking the question of all of us who know the Christmas story of how God gave himself to us in humble service. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I was a wise man, I would do my part. The carol gives the answer, yet what I can give him my heart.
Wow.
So beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah, quiet leadership spiritually throughout the years, and you wonder what God did with those messages and how many people were impacted by them.
Yeah.
She was a charitable woman too, and obviously we think back to Prince Philip, was the head of so many charities, which she obviously encouraged and supported. But I think as a philanthropist, she needs to be acknowledged as well.
Yeah. I mean, in a role like that, you are an example. What the Queen does, or what the Queen says, or what the Queen likes, and what she eats, and she has a huge impact, her example. And I think her ability to forgive, she went through some tough relationship issues in the family and in her relations. And I think one thing that amazes me, even her sister, Princess Margaret, she caused some issues over her lifetime, and yet the Queen managed to maintain that relationship with her sister. Her ability to forgive and reach out and try and bring people back into the royal family, I think that's an example to all of us.
Yes, incredibly loyal and loving family member. And I heard Sir Lockwood Smith speaking this morning about his anecdotes of the Queen, and he said he would always refer to her family members by their first name, even in formal circumstances. So I was talking to Philip, or I mentioned to Margaret, or I said to Charles. I think they were are a very loving and very close family, despite everything that we read in the tabloids. Well, lovely to be remembering Queen Elizabeth II. Stay with us on Shine TV as we continue this reflection.
Tributes are starting to flow. King Charles' statement, of course, which we read a little while ago, just spoke of a moment of the greatest sadness and said how they were comforted by the deep affection with which the Queen was held all around the world.
She really was.
If there was a word that you could use to describe the Queen, what would it be? Amazing, honourable, faithful. You've used considered. She was an example, dependable, classy, sassy.
A day of mixed emotions, and
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people in shock really, and just can't quite believe.
It is with great sadness that New Zealand wakes to the news of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I know I speak for all New Zealanders in conveying our deepest sympathy to members of the royal family and condolences to King Charles III on behalf of the government and New Zealanders at this time of enormous loss. The last days of the Queen's life captures who she was in so many ways, working till the very end on behalf of the people she loved. And that is why I'm sure that we will receive the news of her passing with both emotions of deep sadness, but also gratitude for a life that was utterly and completely devoted to the service of others. The Queen has been such a constant in our lives for 70 years, the longest-serving monarch in British history. Her commitment to her role and to all of us has been without question and unwavering. She has also demonstrated courage, compassion and humour. A strong memory I will have of her is her laughter. She was extraordinary. To honour the passing of the Queen of New Zealand and realm countries, we move into a period of official mourning. Flags will be flown at half-mast. This is a time of deep sadness. Young or old, there is no doubt that a chapter is closing today. And with that, we share our thanks for an incredible woman who we were lucky enough to call our Queen.
Britain's Queen Elizabeth II passed away very recently, and we're remembering the woman that she was and her long 70-year reign on Shine TV today. I'm joined on the couch by Will, who works for Shine TV but is also a British man himself. Hello, Will.
It's true, very true. Born in the centre of London. So,
very nice.
Yes, no, an extraordinary day. I've just got back from London actually, and it's bizarre to come here and feel the warmth that Kiwis have for Queen Elizabeth. You know, she was an extraordinary woman who, of course, we must remember that power was thrust upon her, as Peter said, at a very young age. And I think one of the most extraordinary things for me is that she was on the throne for 70 years in a very male-dominated world, and she became the most famous person in the world was a woman, you know, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think, you know, we must remember her primarily as an incredible wife and mother and grandmother, you know, and what a role model for all the, you know, I've got 2 daughters, what a role model for women across the world in that, you know, in the immense period of change.
You mentioned the outpouring of love in New Zealand, but I mean, amazing to see what's been happening in London and the thousands of people who have been turning up to the gates of Buckingham Palace and to Balmoral. And I mean, I think this is going to go on for weeks and weeks and weeks, but this is a woman who was loved by her people.
It's huge. I mean, I think you've got to remember that even if you're not a royalist, the Queen has been at the corner of your mind your whole life. You know, I mean, she's been on the stamps, she's been on the banknotes. You know, you refer to her. She is the most famous person in the world, and I think you have to be pretty cold to say you weren't affected today. I think a lot of people have reported. Some of my Kiwi friends and some of my friends in London said they woke up, saw the news, and just actually cried. You know, it's not. But I think it's also important to note that it's not a tragedy. She had a long, successful life. This is not a sort of Princess Di situation. And I think, you know, she was incredibly inspiring to so many people.
We mentioned 15 prime ministers.
I know.
And I think, you know, some people make the mistake of assuming that the role is ceremonial and perhaps she had no influence in the political world. But that's not the case when you speak to prime ministers when they leave office, and they talk about being grilled by Her Majesty the Queen and her very much letting them know what her perspective and opinion was. I mean, that's got to be an intimidating thing, turning up and having to face the Queen.
Absolutely. You know, she was the top person. But what was lovely, you know, being so incredibly famous, she did actually have a very natural sense of a real intelligence and wit, you know, and she would put these prime ministers in their place. You know, it's just exactly who you want as a queen, you know, not someone with some huge ego. So, you know, and as you say, it's mentioned on the Christmas broadcast, you know, she very much tried to, you know, represent her Christian faith to the country, and not in a sort of didactic way, but, you know, just in a gentle way, saying, this has given me strength, I hope it gives you strength. And I think, you know, many, certainly when I was growing up, you know, even if your household wasn't massively royalist, you absolutely would watch the Queen on Christmas Day, you know, and that would give a sense of continuity and happiness. And I think we all need that in this changing world. I think that's what people are going to miss the most, that sense of, oh, well, there's the sun and the moon and the season and the Queen, obviously, you know. And I think that's, you know, I think that's what Boris was hinting at, that sort of childlike thing of, well, of course, the Queen's going to last forever. And I think that's the sort of strange, you know, it should be expected, but it's an unexpected shock today.
Well, it's amazing when you think how often we change our world leaders, prime ministers or presidents. You know, essentially they last 3 or 4 years, and even if they have 2 terms, maybe 8 years, and that's a long-serving, you know, president of the United States. But the Queen has seen many of them in and out, has met them all, and has managed to do it, you know, so very well. What do you think will happen in Britain over the next couple of weeks? I understand that they have already had a plan for the state funeral, which one can imagine will be the largest in history.
Yeah, no, I think chaos. I think the traffic will stop. I think people will not go to work. I think everyone will give up. No, I think it will be a big deal. It really will. And obviously the funeral has been planned for a long time. The obituaries have all been planned. But it will be, the nation will draw to a standstill and mark their respects, and I think that will be felt across the world. It's a very big deal. But I do hope that in all that sort of pomp and circumstance, that they remember the person that she was, a mischievous, good fun person. I was lucky enough to meet her once, actually. For some reason, we had an absurdly advanced science department set up at my school, and she came to visit just out of curiosity. And I had, for some reason, was in charge of a Bunsen burner, which can't have been okay, because there was the Queen, and there was. But luckily, there was no actual flame disaster. I didn't set fire to either the bench or myself, or indeed the Queen.
But on this couch, we've had one near birth on the yacht Britannica and one Bunsen burner disaster. I mean, I would have loved to have spoken to the Queen about the times that things did go wrong, because I'm sure there's been some spectacular faux pas in front of her that she must have laughed about.
And of course, what we really want to know is what went on behind the scenes. Apparently, she was a big fan of Only Fools and Horses. She quite liked pizza and burgers and stuff.
She had an amazing sense of humour. I mean, there's lots of anecdotes, but I heard our own Prime Minister talking about the laughs that she would even have with her on state visits and on the telephone, even as late as the last lockdown. Apparently, Jacinda Ardern and the Queen spent 25 minutes just talking with each other, and most of it was sort of jovial and lighthearted. And I think it was that ability to sort of turn up anywhere and make people feel comfortable, no matter what the experience was.
She had an absolute genius for talking to you, remembering your name, no matter what your status or your age or your gender, or she was very, very gifted in that sense. She could just sort of target, make that trajectory of her conversation up or down to whatever suited. And as you say, just the mischievousness, sort of the asides and all that, that was what was really wonderful about her.
Yes, I'm sure she'll be relieved that she never has to eat a cucumber sandwich again.
Well, apparently she had the same afternoon tea from right when she was in nursery to the day she died.
What were they called?
Jam pennies. Little round bits of white bread with a little bit of jam. She'd have that every afternoon.
She also had, I can now reveal, an enormous appetite. She used to keep treats in her handbag for during these great sort of pageantries and all the rest, just sort of munching away. And she, as you say, she would have 11s. She'd have breakfast, 11s, lunch, afternoon tea, and supper.
And we mustn't forget the honey sandwich with Paddington Bear.
Yes. So many great stories, so many great anecdotes, and that's what happens when you know a person or you have a person in your life for as long as we have. What will be your takeaway memory of Her Majesty, Pete?
Oh, wow. Somebody who took the role very seriously and did it just so sincerely, but also her human touch in all of that. I think, she was a remarkable lady. I just have huge admiration for her.
What about you, Cathy?
Oh, it's tough. So many thoughts come into my head. I just think, thank you for the example, both as a mother, a grandmother, in her role as monarch, a real inspiration.
Will?
Well, I think just extremely human person, very relatable. And to steal a couple of words from your intro, just grace and aplomb. She just pulled it off. She was the real deal.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today to mark the passing of Her Majesty the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. And I think it would be appropriate, because we're on Shine TV, to just close with a word of prayer for the United Kingdom, for the Commonwealth, for her family. So allow me to do that. Father God, we do just thank you for the wonderful woman that was our Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you for her 70 long years on the throne. Thank you for her example, her grace, her humility, the way in which she led us. Lord, we do ask that you would be close to her family. We ask for your peace to rest with them. We ask for your blessing on King Charles III as he takes the throne, whenever that happens. We pray that you would give him wisdom and the ability to transition into this new era. And we ask for your peace to be with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth at this time. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for being with us on Shine TV.